into it here in just a minute, but I wanted to just start with a little story. How many of you ever went to summer camp as a kid? Yes, church summer camp. Keep your hands up. All right. I went to many church summer camps. I grew up in New Mexico, in a little town in New Mexico, and our Nazarene church had a big summer camp that I would go to. I loved it. And I think parents sent us to camp thinking we were going to go find Jesus at camp. What I found was my first kiss. We toilet papered some of the dormitories of the girls, snuck out. It was the first time I got in big trouble and kind of broke the rules. We had a lot of fun at summer camp. What was even better to do at summer camp was to be a counselor. Was anyone ever got to be a counselor? And those of you, I love her. She's like, yes, yes, it's fun. I got to be a counselor a few times. What was so fun about being a counselor is you're a few years older, typically, than the kids you're counseling, and so it's the coolest I've ever felt in my entire life. Because they just, they like adore you, you're a few grades ahead of them. I was probably 14 or 15 the first time I got to do it, and the kids at the camp were probably 9 or 10. And I had become good friends with a girl from Roswell, New Mexico, named Celeste. And Celeste was wild and fun, and we decided we were going to be the coolest camp counselors at camp. And so I had a boys' dorm, she had a girls' dorm, and the tradition was, on Wednesday or Thursday every camp, we'd get to go into town and go to the water slide, the water park, and just have a blast together. So Celeste and I were super excited for this big water slide day at the park. And we had talked about the fact Celeste was tall and a little bit larger, and I was tall, and we thought, you know what, at the water park, we can go down that water slide probably faster than anyone. It was kind of a competition. And so Celeste and I planned at the water park, we were going to have a lot of fun and kind of show everyone off, be the cool camp counselors. So we get up to the top of the water slide, and we were going to ride the mat together, because we were very convinced we'd be very fast if we rode together. And the annoying lifeguard said, no, it was too much weight for the two of us on one mat. So he said he was going to send me down first. So I had this brilliant idea. I leaned over to Celeste and I said, I'll meet you halfway down, and I'll hide, and you can just kind of come down and ride with me. So I go down about halfway down the water slide. I take my arms and my legs and spread eagle, like up on the sides of the water slide to stop. The water's still going, but I'm up on the water slide, just waiting, kind of hiding down so the lifeguard couldn't see me, and I'm waiting for Celeste. I didn't know if she was next or a couple people to go. So I look, and there was a kind of a bend in the water slide, and a little wave of water kind of came around the corner. Wasn't Celeste. It was probably a 9 or 10-year-old camper who crashed into me and then kept going. I'm waiting, and I'm waiting for Celeste, because we are going to show everyone how to really do this water slide. So the next thing, I look up, and a wall of water comes around the corner, and I know Celeste is on her way. So I'm laying there. And this is the 80s, when like parachute pants and large parachute pants, large kind of parachute baggy swimsuits is what I had on. So Celeste comes barreling around the corner super fast, and I'm laying there waiting on my mat for Celeste. Her foot hits right here on my side, goes into my swimsuit, and proceeds to yank off my swimsuit, takes the swimsuit with Celeste and my mat. And water slides are just white, if you remember. They're just a big white tube, and I am stark naked camp counselor with no mat. And if you've ever felt a water slide without a mat, for some reason it's not that smooth. I don't know why, but it's almost a little sandpapery. And I am just laying there. Celeste is long gone with my mat and my swimsuit, and I am stark naked waiting for Celeste, or waiting for the next person, praying, oh, may it be someone I know from my cabin. And I'm waiting, again, naked. You can't move naked on the slide. I mean, I was trying to just start the bear crawl down. Celeste is long gone. And a a tiny little wall of water comes around the corner, and it's probably a 9 or 10-year-old girl camper from our who crashes into me. I introduce myself, and I said, her name was Sarah, and I said, Sarah, sorry, first of all, that this is how you had to see this. Can we wrap up in your mat together and ride down to the end of the water slide? So we did. And who had gathered quite the crowd down at the bottom was Celeste, holding up my swimsuit and just waiting for us to come crashing down. You may wonder, what in the world does this have to do with church or forgiveness or any of the things we're talking about today? You know, why do we not like to be naked? And we're certainly not, that's not anything we would do here at church. But our clothes like to, they cover up the things we don't want people to see. And isn't it true when we come to a church like this that we clothe up not the physical things, but the spiritual, the emotional, the things that we have gone through as individuals. And I've often wondered if we could take the time and have every single person, one by one, come stand on the stage I'm standing on right now and share with us kind of everything that's gone on in your life. The hurts, the pains, the things that didn't quite go as you expected, the times you have been in much need of forgiveness, the times you have had to share a bunch of forgiveness with someone else because they deeply hurt you. I think we'd be shocked. This church, I think in particular, attracts, and I think this is what makes our church so wonderful, attracts a certain type of people many times who've been kind of cast out at other places. And it's what makes this congregation so incredibly beautiful. But just imagine if we had that time to one by one hear the things that you've struggled with, the things that you've dealt with, the times you've had to ask for forgiveness. I know Jeremy was leading a few months ago a study, and he came home and told me that it was from people here in this congregation, and he said, there's just so much hurt and pain that people have gone through. It's a lot. And so what does that have to do with Lent and forgiveness and what we're talking about today? Peter, he's with the disciples. He is a disciple. He's with Jesus. And he asked this question, Lord, Jesus, how many times should I forgive? And he says 7. Now here's a little bit of background. Jewish culture was 3 was a really good level of forgiveness. 3 times. So we don't really know for sure, but it almost feels as if Peter is saying, trying to show off just maybe a bit. Hey, Jesus, the standard is 3. How about 7? What do you think, Jesus? 7? And how does Jesus respond? He says, no, 7 times 70. Some translations say 77 times, some say 7 times 70, which would be 490, higher math here. But between 77 and 490, however you translate it, I don't think Jesus was saying, start counting. And when the person who's hurt you gets to 77, say stop. I don't think that was the message. I think he was saying, it's far bigger than we could ever imagine. It's this unlimited forgiveness. It's forgiving over and over and over. And then Jesus goes on and tells this amazing parable, which I just love, of the unmerciful servant. The servant, I'm going to call him Bob, just to make him seem more real or more personal. The servant, let's say Bob, owes the king, we'll call him Charles, okay, King Charles. He owes the king a lot of money. In fact, it's translated to mean in today's dollars, millions and millions of dollars he owes this king. All this money. And the king, Charles, is about to throw Bob and his wife and his children into jail or sell them. And this is pretty extreme to be doing that to a family. But he's doing it because he wants his money. He wants his payment. He's owed millions of dollars in today's dollars, millions. And so Bob falls on his knees and begs King Charles, "Will you forgive me my debt? Please have mercy on me and on my family, my wife, my kids." And guess what King Charles does? He forgives him. And then Bob literally leaves that scene and goes to find, let's call him Larry, goes to find Larry, who owes him not millions of dollars, but as it's translated to believe, just a few hundred or thousands of dollars, something that could be easily kind of repaid over a little bit of time. Goes and finds Larry. Remember, Bob has just been forgiven by King Charles, millions of dollars. And then he turns around and he goes and finds Larry and says, "Hey, you owe me. Pay up." Larry begs for mercy and forgiveness of the debt. And what does Bob do? Says, "Forget it, I'm not forgiving you," and throws him into jail. The very man who had just been forgiven so much turns right around and then will not forgive someone else. It's a pretty powerful lesson. I don't think Jesus was trying to be subtle in this story. It's kind of right there for us to read and see. It's a bit of a warning message for all of us. Why is forgiveness so tough? It hurts to forgive sometimes, right? And many times we know that maybe we're right. I got into many arguments with my father. I knew I was right. But I just had to sometimes back down and say, okay, let's just live in peace. Let's move on. I know Google says this is how many people live in Michigan, but you're right, Dad, you're right, yes. You know, Google helps solve those fights today, right? You can look it up. But then Google's wrong. That's what I was told. So forgiveness is tough. And like I said, if we could just take time today and listen to each and every one of you share the hurt, I think we'd be shocked. We're a people, many of whom have overcome a lot. And yet, God calls us in this season of Lent to this spirit of forgiveness. If you think about Lent and Easter, there's probably no single greater example in human history of forgiveness. The whole message of Easter is forgiveness. It's right there in front of us. So Julie mentioned in the story that was half true earlier that she told, I'm kidding, as she shared about kind of my past. I haven't done this for 18 years, so since I was 12. But it was 18 years ago that on a Saturday night I told my wife, and we had 4 children, 4 and under at the time. One of them's here today, no longer 4, 20 now. I told her I was gay, and kind of the whole world was turned on its head. And some of you have been through this story, similar versions of it. That was a Saturday night. On Monday morning at my Edward Jones office, I was not a practicing pastor at the time, but I was ordained and did some speaking on the side. The pastor of my church, the local Nazarene church that I went to in Idaho, I looked up at my Edward Jones office about 9 a.m. and he was walking in the door. And I thought, oh, this is not going to go well. And he came in, and he said, so your wife, Mark's told me what's going on, and I have a paper I'd like you to sign. You have 24 hours. Please decide one of two things. Either you're gay, and sign this paper that you won't sue us and you rescind your ordination, or be straight and stay married and continue with the life you had. And for those of you who've been in a similar situation, those aren't really options, right? And in that short meeting, and then he left the office, kind of my whole world turned upside down. My entire life had been church and friends, and everyone was connected through that, and literally no one was talking. I was all alone. And certainly, I had not handled things well. I was in need of much forgiveness, trust me, in how I had handled it. But it set off a pretty difficult course. The next day, fun fact, my secretary, who was an amazing Catholic lady, I came in the next day, and I saw on her computer she had cut a picture out, and it was the pastor of the church. And she had taped it to her computer. And I said, Kathy, why do you have this picture on your computer? And she goes, I'm praying for his salvation. She said, I'm praying for him that he won't treat people this way. It was a painful time. About a year later, Logan, who's here, his identical twin, was diagnosed with cancer. And we had a public website where people could go and write things about Luke, that they were praying for him. He had stage 4 neuroblastoma cancer. And the pastor of the church went in and wrote a verse from the Old Testament about how the sin of the father is on the son. And I mean, this was a rough time. And over the years that followed, Luke went into tons of treatment, then he went into remission, and then his cancer came back. And during that time, I was in counseling therapy. I was in needed a lot of help. The church that all this had happened at was kind of right in an area where I had to drive every day. Like if I was going to go pretty much anywhere, I had to drive by that. And it was just this constant reminder of the pain and hurt that had happened. Some self-inflicted, a lot not self-inflicted. And my counselor one day, she said, you know, Mark, I have a task for you today. She said, I want you to, when you leave from this counseling session today, she said, I want you to go drive to the church. I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. What am I to do? And she said, I want you to pull into the parking lot. And she said, promise me you won't leave until you just let it all go. So I did. I drove into that parking lot, and I sat in my car, and I prayed, and I cussed, and I cried. There's a saying, Christ said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I said that. And I just asked, God, would you just let this go? Because you know what was happening? Is they had moved on. But every day, I was living with this intense pain that was like crippling. It was starting to ruin my life. And she said, Mark, for you to move on, you just need to let it go. You're not saying it was okay what happened, but just forgive. And I can tell you there's a lot of dots to fill in the 18 years since all of this happened. That pastor's not the pastor there anymore. Jeremy and I have gone there many times when we're visiting family back in Idaho. It's a great church. And when I go now, I feel complete love. And there is a forgiveness that can happen when we offer people something that maybe is not deserved, but something that releases us, that allows us to walk into the future with new hope and new boldness. You were given a hook when you came in. This hook, and thank you to the team who magnificently glued these together this week. The purpose of this is not a gimmick, although several of you came up and said these would make great earrings and all sorts of stuff, as is typical of this church. I heard someone say one time that failing to forgive someone, when we don't forgive someone, we're basically putting them on a hook. Think of a hook on a wall, way up on a wall, and you literally, if you could, lift someone up and just kind of hang them by the collar and put them on that hook and let them hang there. Isn't it true sometimes when someone's really hurt us, that actually kind of feels good, if we're honest about it? And then kind of in some way or not, we kind of walk by them or we see them or we constantly are reminding them of the pain that they caused us, the hurt they caused us. And there's something that, if we're honest, I think sometimes feels good about that, putting them up on the hook and literally letting them have it for what they did. But isn't it also true, and this is what the counselor told me, and she's so right, is at some point, it's us that ends up on the hook. When we fail to let go and forgive and move on and try to bring peace and heal, then the person we originally put up on the hook, they've moved on. But we're kind of stuck, and we end up on that hook. And isn't it true sometimes we put ourselves on the hook? We all make mistakes, we all fail, we all have moments where we do stuff that we just wish we had never done. The plans that we had don't come into play. Isn't it true sometimes we put ourselves on the hook? Or even, isn't it true for some of us, we've put God on that hook? Because our life, sickness, whatever it may be, didn't quite turn out as we thought, and so then that interrupts our relationship with God because we put him on the hook and failed to forgive and failed to move on. I've asked Peter if he would just come and play, and I want you just to take just a minute, and if you're comfortable with this, pull out this hook that was handed to you when you came in. And I just want to ask you to, maybe if you're so bold, think through your relationships, your friendships, your family. Is there someone out there right now that you need to forgive? And maybe this week you need to give them a call, or just reach out, and you don't even need to say, hey, I forgive you, because that's reminding them of how they hurt you. But maybe just give them a call and say, I love you, I miss you, and I don't like where we're at in our friendship. Is there someone, and maybe you just want to be so bold as, without looking at each other, just write down their name on this little sheet of paper. Take this home. Give them a call. Offer them some forgiveness. Do like I did, pull into a parking lot if you need to pull into a parking lot. Maybe not pull into someone's house, all right? But pull into that parking lot, take a drive. Maybe the name you need to write on here is your own. Maybe you just haven't let yourself go, forgive yourself for past. And you're just kind of living in that constant, being hard on yourself. Or maybe it's God. But as Peter plays, I want you to just take a minute and maybe reflect. God, during this season of Lent, we, first of all, just thank you for forgiveness, for the amazing lesson you taught us when Peter said, is it 7 times? And you say, no, 7 times 70. May we be people, maybe we be a church where we offer forgiveness, even in times when it's not deserved or even asked for. And for the person here today who maybe needs to make a phone call or just reach out to someone and say, hey, I've missed you. I love you. May we be so bold to do that. Thank you, God. Thank you for this time. Amen.